Good evening, everyone. We're waiting for several folks to join, so give us a few minutes, but folks are starting to come in. Thank you. Number keeps ticking up. That's good. Good. All right, just let a couple more folks come in and then I think we'll get started. So thank you all for joining tonight. Good. So David, Allen, shall we get started?
Sure.
All right, David,
All
kick
right.
us off.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and thanks for coming tonight to our sixth and final of our Great Decisions talks. We've had wonderful presentations this semester, and we're once again very pleased and grateful that we could collaborate with St. Norbert College. So my name is David Corey. I'm a faculty member at UW Green Bay in the Humanities, Modern Languages and Global Studies program, and representing UW Green Bay in tonight's event. Although this is the last one of the Great Decisions officially sponsored, we did want to share just very quickly an event that we will also be co-sponsoring together with St. Norbert. You can see here, we're very fortunate to be able to have the official spokesperson of the Embassy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Mr. Fahad Nazir, who will be speaking Friday, April 30th from 1 to 2 p.m. All in the, after we get started, I'll put the link for the Zoom. Registration is required just like it is for this. But we hope that some of you might consider attending and asking some questions about US-Saudi relations. Very important topic these days. So that will be on April the 30th. But tonight, we're very pleased, though, to have our final talk on China and Africa. So Dan, would you like to say a few words about that?
Sure. So generally, we have a student do the introduction, and I'm looking on our attendee list, and unfortunately, I don't think our student has been able to join. So I'll just begin by saying we're very pleased to welcome Allen Xiao to our lecture tonight. Allen's a PhD candidate at the University of,
She's here.
Okay, she's there. So sorry, Emily, let me, all right. There we are. Okay. Emily, are you able to join us with your video as well as microphone?
It will not let me start my video, but I still have an introduction lined up for our speaker tonight.
Okay, please go ahead then.
All right, the speaker for tonight is UW-Madison's PhD candidate, Allen Xiao. He has done research on African urbanism, ethnicity and immigration, and Chinese in Africa, and is currently researching the formation of urban identity in Lagos, the largest African city. Allen Xiao has published several works, including but not limited to The Chinese in Nigeria, Discursive Ethnicities, and Disassembling Experiences in the Journal of Contemporary Ethnography this year.
Good, thank you. Allen.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, yeah, I bet everyone can see it. Okay, it's my pleasure to give this guest talk about China and Africa. And I'm a Chinese, and I have studied like Africa for almost 10 years. And so this is one of my favorite topics in my academic life. So today I'm going to give you some overview of China's engagement in Africa, in contemporary Africa, and also tells you some of my thoughts and insight into this topic in the global affairs. Okay. So I'm going to start from some historical lessons about China in Africa, give you some historical trajectories of China's engagement in Africa, starting from the ancient China. So when China was kind of an ancient empire in the East Asia, China has already started the contact with Africa. So the earliest kind of the recorded document shows that dating back to the 14th century, a Chinese explorer had already reached Africa, especially the Egypt. And the famous one, probably you have known from the reading, is Zheng He, who is an official explorer, the admiral sent by the Chinese Ming Dynasty emperor in the 15th century. And he made 7 diplomatic missions to many countries, like along the so-called the maritime Silk roads. So he has reached the East Africa farthest. That's like today's Somalia. And so this map shows where his fleet had reached along the Indian Oceans. And in the colonial era of China, and the British colonializations also brought Chinese labor to South Africa. So this has a very special history dating back to the Anglo-Boer War in the early 20th century. So after that war, the production on the gold mines of Witwatersrand in the South Africa was very low due to lack of labor. So the British colonizers was eager to get these mines back as quickly as possible. So the British colonizers also has part of the dominations in China at that moment, particularly in northern China. So the British administrations brought around 63,000 Chinese laborers from northern province of China to the South Africa. They are contracted miners and work in very ranged environment in the South Africa for around like 6 years. And until like the British Parliament like abandoned this kind of act, and then this kind of Chinese labor in South Africa, and then they stayed in South Africa, becoming the first generation of Chinese migration in South Africa. And so let's move on to the post-independence Africa. So after 1949, when the communist China dominated the mainland China, and then the Mao Zedong take over the regimes. So China becomes a part of the Afro-Asian solidarity networks. So this was based in the Cold War. And so China was aligned with the Soviet Union, and also in the shadow of the Cold War, and China and also becomes one of the key actors in these Afro-Asian connections. There's several key events happened during that period. The famous one is Bandung Conference. It was a kind of multinational conference between the Asian and African countries, especially newly independent countries. This conference took place in 1955 in Bandung, Indonesia, in order to promote Afro-Asian economic and cultural cooperations and to oppose the colonialisms and imperialisms globally. And later on, in 1957, another conference was held in Cairo and forming the Afro-Asian People's Solidarity Organizations. And this conference also demonstrates that this Afro-Asian linkage becomes a very strong third world linkage in the context of the Cold War. Several events happened in that kind of context. One is the Chinese, the Republic of China, the People's Republic of China's return to the United Nations and the replacement of the Taiwan on the Security Council. So this happened in 1971, and China was admitted to the UN by getting a vote of the supporting vote, by getting a vote of 76 countries, and 34% of this vote came from African countries. So this means that China was fully supported by the African countries in the return to the global arena. Another event in this kind of Afro-Asian solidarity contest is Tanzara. So this is a very important infrastructure project in the East Africa dating back in the 1970s. And this railway, Tanzara Railway, started from the port of Dar es Salaam, the capital city of the Tanzania at that time, and reaching into the hinterland of the Africa, the Copper Belt province in the Zambia. The whole project was financed and also completely supported by the Communist China from the 1970 to the 1975. And it was the longest railway in the sub-Saharan Africa at that time, and also the largest single foreign aid project undertaken by China at that time. And the book written by the Professor Jamie Monson, who is a professor of history at the Michigan State University now, titled Africa's Freedom Railway, provide very vivid descriptions of the impact of this railway on the livelihood in African countries, especially in terms of the changes of the building, the changes of the landscape, the population movement along the railway and the surrounding provinces, and the rise of the local and regional enterprises in these African countries. And when China entered a new era, it's called the era of reform and opening up. And then China's engagement with Africa is kind of slowed down because the whole policy, the whole politics was focused on the economic growth, economic reform. The left-hand pictures, you can see the elder man on this kind of the billboard, and his name is Deng Xiaoping, who is the core leader of the second generation of Chinese regimes. in the 1970s, in the late 1970s, and throughout 1980s until the middle of the 1990s. So under his leadership, China entered a completely different kind of regimes. He has a series of the reformed policies, so-called socialism with Chinese characteristics. Actually, there are many scholars actually call it's the essence of this policy or this kind of a regime is state capitalism. And China currently has, I would say, becomes the most capitalist country in the world because of the economic development and the growth. So, and given this kind of economic reform, in the 2010, China overtook Japan as the world's second largest economy. So the whole theme during these 2 decades focus on the economic growth, economic productivity. And the Chinese engagement in Africa primarily manifests itself in the individual the migration to Africa. The picture on the right hand actually shows a man on the phone and under the umbrella holding by a safeguard is named Mr. Hu Jieguo. He's one of the earliest Chinese migrants in Nigeria. He was born in 1948, and he went to Nigeria right after the opening up in 1979. He paid a very brief visit to Nigeria, and then he came back. Actually, he came to learn hotel management. And then in the 1987, he returned to Nigeria and built up a newly splendid kind of a very large hotel in Nigeria. And currently has a very big kind of corporations involving various kind of aspects of the business. And he was also the first kind of namely chief appointed by the Nigerian government. So he has a legendary stories reported by many kind of Chinese newspapers, and he was a representative figures of the individual and independent migration to Africa during that 20 years. So when we entered a new era, this after 1999, so China's engagement with Africa, it's moving fast. So several key policies were enacted. So 1999 going out policy, actually this is a kind of a promotion of Chinese investment abroad, mainly kind of Chinese capital going abroad, purchase some kind of asset or join some kind of buy some shares in some big companies. So, and then 2000, so this is the year of establishment of a forecast, that is the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. So there's this kind of conference was held alternatively in China and Africa every 3 years, dating back from the 2000s. And so several African countries also held such conferences, such as Ethiopia, Egypt, and South Africa. And the Belt and Road Initiative probably is the famous kind of a geopolitical initiative right now. It's the new kind of, it's demonstrated the new ambitions of Chinese engagement, global engagement, not only Africa, but also other developing and developed countries. So this kind of a Road and Belt Initiative, the the belt means the Silk Road economic belt, which is a kind of overland route for the road and the rail transportation through the Central Asia along the historical trade route to the West Europe. And then another word, the road means the 21st century maritime Silk Road, actually referring to the Indo-Pacific Sea route through the Southeast Asia to South Asia, Middle East, and East Africa. The primary goal for this geopolitical initiative is infrastructure development, and built on that, also China also tried to sign various kinds of economic cooperation agreement with the respective countries. Currently, 140 countries and 31 international organizations had signed 205 agreements with China on various kind of the topics. So the key argument after this kind of historical review, the key argument for me today is China's engagement with Africa is inherited from Chinese economic growth, and then there's a kind of ideology implicated in this kind of engagement. So I'm going to talk about this key ideology called the pragmatism. So how the economic pragmatism manifests itself in both China's development and also China's engagement in Africa, and how Chinese apply this kind of pragmatisms to its engagement with Africa. Two famous quotes from Deng Xiaoping, the leaders in the Chinese economic reform. And these two quotes demonstrate the core ideology in the Chinese development. The first one is, it means that it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white as long as it's catching mice. So it's a metaphor, and this metaphor actually means China emphasized so much on the increased productivity, increased economic productivities, and this economic productivities is the ultimate goal and the criteria for the societal development. And so the way to achieve this kind of goal is, the second quote is to cross the river by filling the stones. So this metaphor actually means the trial and error experiment, as well as the case-by-case solutions. So China actually initiated many kind of the policies and projects, and then they try to initiate something and to see the result and then duplicate or adjust. So these two ideologies was well positioned in the China's development, and also as well as China's engagement with Africa. I'm going to talk about 5 aspects of the China's engagement with Africa, 3 of which are covered by your reading, and I will add 2 more in terms of the agriculture and education. So the first one is infrastructure. So as you know, the Belt and Road Initiative actually focuses on infrastructure. And there's also a very famous saying in the China's economic reform era that if you want to get rich, build a road first. And that's why China spent much money and time on the infrastructure, on the infrastructure development, including high-speed railway, as you may know. And the Chinese, this company, the state-owned enterprise, China Civil Engineering Construction Corporations, actually takes a very active role in overseas contracting construction, including road building and railway, the railway building, all these different kinds of the projects across the developed and developing countries. So the book on the right hand is very interesting. So this is ethnography telling that Chinese laborers in Africa, the livelihood of these laborers, and they actually is very different from the kind of the laborers in the South Africa. And these laborers actually they brought by the Chinese government, but they are from the rural areas of China. They are in a very poor the background, and then the reason they travel travel to build a road in Africa is to cherish a hope for returning China rather than settling down in Africa, especially returning the city in China. So the rural urban migration in China actually stimulates these migrants to Africa, because now currently direct migration from rural to the urban areas is very difficult for these kind of laborers. And they want to accumulate the capital, some of the money abroad, and then bring this kind of the capital back to China so they can build up their livelihood in urban China. So that means the urbanization in China is tied up with the urbanizations and the infrastructure developments in Africa. That's another issue. So I'm going to very briefly talk about this case, Djibouti. So Djibouti is the site of the first Chinese military base, in the world, and so it's seen as a kind of a threat, because people think that, oh, China is going to build a military base, and then China is going to build a Djibouti port, and then China lend money into Djibouti. So this is a debt trap. So this is a very common critique of Chinese Chinese help with Djibouti's port. However, the famous professor, the China-Africa specialist, Deborah Blottinger, who is based in Johns Hopkins University, so she spent a lot of time on this kind of topic and also in the field, and she found out that this is a really kind of myth. And so China's the discourse of that trap is really kind of the rumor at least now, because China has no sign of China trying to hold any strategic asset by lending the money to the African countries. And also this actually Djibouti port was supposed to be built by a company based in Dubai. Because of this company failed to accomplish their promise financially, so Djibouti government turned their attention to China, and then this kind of a Djibouti port project came out. And also in terms of her argument, in any kind of the large project, especially for the small countries, borrowing money is very common. But still, China has to get some benefit from the lending money to these small developing countries. So what's the benefit? Primarily at this moment, the benefit is political. It's political benefit. China wants to get some political support from these developing countries to lobby with many other countries, because China's now the global positionality of China currently is a really kind of it's really troublesome. So they want to get some political support from other countries, especially from the Africa. It's not like a Cold War but still it's really like it reflects this kind of worry in Chinese politics. Okay, technology. I'm going to talk about briefly talk about two companies. One is Huawei, the famous like disputable companies charged by the Trump administration, and so this company actually have a widespread influence not only in Africa but also across the globe. But I just want to make a very short point here is that Huawei actually is faced with many kind of bans, not only from the US government, but also from European, many other countries. So these kind of bans actually stimulates these kind of technology companies to focus on some countries like African countries. And so they try to prosper economically from the Africans' move to the 5G and other technology development. So, and then another company probably is very kind of overlooked in the media and also the observance is the Techno. So this so the right hand up, this picture shows is a kind of Techno feature phone. And the Safaricom and M-Pesa is a kind of online payment systems in Kenya and also some other East African countries. So Techno, these companies actually is very influential Chinese technology, Chinese mobile phone company in Africa now. So this company was only established in 2006. And in 2008, it came to focus on Africa. But 10 years later, in 2017, it has become the largest phone companies, manufacturing companies in Africa. Now it's the phone actually manufactured in Shenzhen in China as well as in Bangladesh, but it holds the 41% of share of the smartphone market in Africa, way more than the Samsung, Apple, and the other brands. So it has a really kind of influential footprint on Africa market right now. There's many stories of why it has such growth. So I can tell you more probably later in the Q&A. So let's move on. The agriculture. So here I'm just want to give you a case about the Chinese agricultural demonstration centers, because this is a very interesting kind of engagement with Africa. So different from other sectors like technology led by the private companies, infrastructure led by the Chinese government. So this sector, agricultural sectors, actually is demonstrating private-public partnerships between the Chinese government and the Chinese companies. So because since China fed 20% of the world's population with only 9% of world arable land, and the 98% of this kind of agriculture is made up of the smallholders farm. So this kind of a model, agricultural model, is very attractive to many African countries. So they lobbied China with this kind of support in agricultural techniques. So Chinese government, so they approach to the respective African countries first and try to build up the center, this agricultural demonstration center first. So they try to become some kind of educational center, and then the government puts out a tender for the Chinese agro companies to buy for the project. And in the 4 or 5 years later, after the company find a path to the economic growth, or economic sustainability, and then Chinese government put the hands off and hand over the ownership to the private companies. And also the private companies, Chinese companies have to have a local partners in this kind of project. So this is a kind of a triangular partnership between the Chinese government, Chinese companies, and the local partners. Okay, so let's move on to the last aspect, education. So I'm going to talk about also a very disputable actors in this field, Confucius Institute. In the many Western countries, Confucius Institutes represent a Chinese propaganda, especially propaganda from the government, and also the suppressions of academic freedom. However, in the African case, primarily Confucius Institute is a kind of language training center. I would like to talk about the Confucius Institute in the context of the influx of African students in China. These two things are highly related. So from my observations in the field in Nigeria, as well as at least 10 other African countries, every time I paid a visit to a country, and then I always want to see how the Confucius Institute operates. Very interestingly, most of them, the primary work in these Confucius Institutes is to teach language and also to help the African students pass the exam, so-called HSK, that Chinese proficiency test. Why this test is important in the Confucius Institute? Because from my observation, many African students, they don't care much about so-called cultural transmission or any kind of Chinese cultural transmission of Chinese culture. They don't care about that. They only care that how to go to China, and especially how to go to China freely. So the way to go to China freely is to get scholarship to study in China. Meanwhile, they can engage in the China-Africa trade. They can buy products and then transfer back to Africa. So learning Chinese becomes a gateway to migrate to China, to engage with China. So because to get the Chinese government scholarship, which is very generous to cover everything, including the living expense over the period of study. So to get this scholarship is to at least get the level 4 of HSK test. So that's why, so in many Confucius Institutes, they try to train the students to pass the examinations. So this is a very different scenario from the critique of Confucius Institutes in America. Because according to statistics about Chinese government scholarships, like for example, in the 2010, this year, there are 50% of these awardees of this scholarship comes from Asia, 25% from Africa, and very few, probably 10%, is from the Europe and America. So this is really kind of the motivations for the African students to study Chinese at Confucius Institute. Okay, so let's come to the conclusion of this talk. Is there a Chinese model? So in the reading, the author Van Standard actually try to summarize and provide you a kind of a picture, the larger picture of China's engagement with Africa by invoking the idea of China, the Chinese model. So I would say it's very complicated to say that is a Chinese model, and also there's no universal definition of a Chinese model. But one thing is very key, That is economic pragmatism. So China, everything China has to do with Africa reflects their pragmatisms, their emphasis on the economic productivity, their emphasis on this kind of the economic growth, the economic benefit. So, and also these pragmatisms also reflected in both private companies and also official and the state-led project. There's one thing representing Chinese model is that is the special economic zones. However, this is not Chinese invention. It's invented like in the 1950s in Ireland, and then in many like Southeast Asian countries, 4 tigers, Taiwan, the Singapore, especially in Singapore, there's much early this kind of export processing zones, like the special economic zones in China, Shenzhen particularly. So, but this doesn't mean that it's a kind of a Chinese model. And particularly when China is trying to build up a special economic zone in Africa, the priority is to build a road. So that means infrastructure is the first thing in their mind. And then they try to see if they can build up special economic zones. So it's not like they are exporting this kind of a model to Africa, because in this kind of a discourse of China's exporting a model to Africa, there's an ignorance of African agency. A famous book written by Howard French is titled China's Second Continent. So this kind of eye-catching title actually describes the new colonialism and imperialism of Chinese engagement with Africa. But this kind of narrative largely neglect the African agency. In many cases, as I said, in the terms of agriculture, education, there's many examples of African agencies try to bring China as a actor together with other actors like the European country and the US, so that the African countries and also African people, they also have the agency to lobby with multiple actors for their own ends. So that is another book, this book by the multiple authors, scholars. They try to tell us we should also take seriously African agency in response to China's engagement with Africa. I think I should stop here, and welcome any questions about this.
Alan, thanks so much. Again, as a reminder to our participants, our attendees, please put your questions in the Q&A box, and Dr. Curry and I will do our best to get to all of them. Alan, if you could maybe take stop sharing your screen, then we can see a bit more of you, and we can get going with the questions. So one that has kind of started us off right now relates to, in some ways, the Belt and Road Initiative, particularly how that is funded. And does the Chinese government, for example, give foreign aid to countries without any conditions, or what kind of conditions are placed on that economic engagement?
Okay, yeah, as I said, when I talked about the debt, so that case in Djibouti port. So of course, like any kind of the economic agreement between two countries, so both parties want to get some benefit. So when China have some foreign aid and the loans to these countries, they expect some returns, of course. So usually, according to the Deborah Brottinger's observations, so currently they don't see any like this kind of debt will bring like the natural sources back from Africa back to China, bring any this kind of strategic asset from the Africa to China. There's no evidence about that. So the major benefits, the major kind of leverage in this case is very likely political in the political sphere. So China want to get some political like support from the African countries, especially African Union, in the international affairs, and in some other aspect, in some other like climate change or some other global negotiations with other countries, they want to get these African entities support and also coordinations in these kind of things. But currently, they wouldn't see some direct kind of exchange with African countries in terms of the economic return.
And if David, if I could, just a quick follow-up then, Alan, the question also says, what about the required use of Chinese workers and companies in building these projects? Is that not often a condition of Chinese assistance in Belt and Road?
Yeah, so there's many interesting like statement about China's China's push to use Chinese labor in this project, and also the local laborers do not benefit from this project. However, in many kind of academic articles and also in my own observation on the ground, so African laborers and African managers in all these kind of projects, they are majorities. So they are majority. I mean, majority means more than 80–90% of the workers, managers, at least the middle range to the so or below, they're all Africans. Very only probably the higher managers, they are Chinese, engineers, they are Chinese. And also, as I said, some of these Chinese, they are from very poor background. And they are brought from, so they are not like required to come to Africa. So they are motivated to come to Africa to work on their projects because they are highly paid by the Chinese government. So so China doesn't have any motivation to promote laborers in China because there's a shortage of laborers in China and the high spends of labor using in China right now. So they don't have any motivation to do this in Africa because they have to pay more to bring this laborers. So that's one of the reasons that that statement probably is not true in most of the cases. But in very small cases, probably, especially in some private companies, they prefer hiring Chinese than the Africans. But usually they are private companies. The person probably in charge, they have this preference, but it doesn't mean that on the whole picture, there's a tendency.
Okay, thank you. David.
Yeah, so Alan, there's another question that ties into that a little bit. And someone is wondering whether you know about any public resistance, either in Africa or China, to this relationship. And I assume they mean resistance to, purely economic pragmatism, basically what you were talking about, from the public, either in Africa or China.
Yeah, so there's a number of resistance against the Chinese operations on the ground, not only in like construction sectors, but also in many other sectors, factories, and also other business sectors. But these reasons primarily focus on laborers, focus on probably work ethics, focus on some labor rights, because that's the problem of the Chinese going out, this kind of the global engagement, because the labor laws in China and Africa, they are different. And when these Chinese people, they operate on the African ground, usually the major issue that the union, the whole union politics is different, and they are not used to it. And also there's a number of well-reported cases of the resistance in that regard. That's the working ethics, because like from some Chinese management perspective, working long, even more than 8 hours, it's normal. But in the local law, probably is illegal. And in also local perspective, it's unreasonable. And so there's a resistance on that. And also some wages and holidays, all these kind of things, and the labor related, the right. So these issues had a resistance, but not so. But generally, like the proportion of the Chinese labor, so is generally that is just I would say rumor, but or is represent the reality. There's this kind of problems, but not that problem, I would say.
Okay. So following up on that, you talked about a number of the misconceptions that people in the West have about Weiwei and some of these other initiatives. And I'm wondering, another, as you know very well, one of the big concerns in the West and the United States are human rights issues. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you could talk about that. I was intrigued by your quote, it doesn't matter if the cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. Yes. And how you see this economic pragmatism related to human rights issues, and if that perhaps is an explanation for China's official stance about economic pragmatism versus human rights.
Yes, so that is a major, like I would say, ideology in the past 4 decades, dating back from 1979, because at that time, so before 1979, you know that China's, I don't know the specific number, but China's economy is really, I would say, it sucks. So it's very, so that people suffered. And then when these new economic regimes was brought in, so people have a very strong desire for economic growth, not only nationally, but also individually. So economic growth or the family prosperity is the priority. And its priority, so that is the first human right for Chinese people in that era. And so that means have something to eat. That is the primary thing for them. And this ideology is brought to not only into many like rural areas in China, but also brought abroad. It's brought to Africa. People think that, and also that's why in Chinese ideology, like economy is important. The personal, the economic livelihood is a key thing. It's key thing to over any kind of other things. Because without this, China suffered for 3 decades under the Mao's regimes. So they understand that so feed ourselves. That is the first thing. And then we talk about other human rights. So this ideology is brought to Africa as well. That's why I said agriculture is a very interesting case, that this is brought by the African leaders, African elite. They think China has achievement in this aspect. They feed the Chinese people with the limited land, and that's why they think they have agricultural advantages. And then they brought these kind of things to Africa, and they want to implement this kind of idea. Same as road construction, same as infrastructure. So that's why they think that this is process. So in the process, of course, in Africa, the development ideologies are highly influenced by the Western cultures. That's why we see that like almost all African countries, like they adopt democracy, one form or another, different kind of systems of democracy. So they are highly influenced by these ideologies. when these kind of ideologies encounter this economic pragmatism ideology, of course, there's a conflict. And of course, there's a kind of, these conflicts are grounded and in a very nuanced way. As I said, working ethics is one way, and then other things. So that's, I would say, that's a way out in Africa, case by case. So people can balance in some ways. It's not, I don't see this is a major conflict. That's why when people say a Chinese model, China's model, they try to underprice the particularity of China's development, but actually it's not. It have a very concrete, contingent kind of trajectories. And that's why China becomes the way China is like. So when it's brought to Africa, and then of course, the encounter triggers different kind of a result.
So we're running out of time, Alan, but there's, I think, time for one more question, and it kind of builds on what you've been talking about related to pragmatism and China's very transactional almost approach to relations in Africa. You referenced China's presence in Djibouti, particularly the fact that it's built its first military base outside of China anywhere in the world. Doesn't that contradict the argument you're making about China being very pragmatic? Because establishing a military base is really for one purpose. That's projecting military power. And when you take the Djibouti base in connection with China arguing that there can't be freedom of navigation in the South China Seas, China building a two oceans navy, you know, is Chinese policy really pragmatic, or is it about projecting Chinese dominance?
Yeah, so things are changing, especially in recent years. So economic pragmatism, that's why the quote I made, I brought here is from Deng Xiaoping. So currently I would say the Xi Jinping's kind of regimes is the fourth kind of generations in Chinese politics. And also, I would say that the reason I brought in the economic pragmatism because it's still here, there, and there. So it's still lasting. I can see like there's something nuanced brought by the Xi Jinping. However, I would say economic pragmatism is still a dominant ideology here now. For example, in the Djibouti's case, yes, like China is building up kind of the first military base outside of China, but this is not uncommon among all the countries. In Djibouti, not only in China, like the US, UK, many other European countries, Japan, they all have a military base in Djibouti. So China is a new player in this scenario. And also, there's a critique in China of the Chinese state in lacking protection over the Chinese enterprises abroad. Because in past, due to the economic pragmatism and also individual kind of development, so all these kind of project and also engagement, they are very individualistic, they are very economic driven. And so generally there's a very shortage of state interventions. For example, there's something like someone, Chinese businessman in Nigeria, it's happening a lot, like around me, and Chinese businessmen are kidnapped. So it happens a lot in Nigeria, but Chinese government have a very limited, I would say, almost none like ability to intervene. So this is a major issue like among the Chinese economic migrants abroad, not only in Africa and also all over the world. Chinese government, the Chinese state is not capable of protecting their citizens, not only before, also even during the pandemic. So this is a major critique of Chinese state. So now Chinese state is now acting is acting strongly in some sphere. But I would say, given the economic volume, given the economic engagement of, like globally, this is just it's just new emerging. So I would say probably we can witness more like actions in the next few years. It's not surprising. And also, I would say this is an extension of economic pragmatism, and also, but I wouldn't exaggerate that into any political motivation.
Okay, good. Alan, thank you so much. Our time is at an end and we're going to have to wrap things up. So thank you very much for giving us your expertise this evening. We very much appreciate it. To everyone who has joined us both tonight as well as the rest of the lectures, we very much appreciate your participation. Look forward to us doing this again next year. UWGB and St. Norbert will be collaborating again. In the meantime, though, we'll be sending out a very short, I promise you, a very short 3-question survey, just asking for some input about how we structure things next year. And we very much hope you'll take the time to complete that. Last thing I'll say is, again, as we've done with the previous lectures, this one was recorded and will be available on the St. Norbert website for great decisions in the next couple of days. So if there are portions that you missed or would like to go back to, that will be available. So thank you very much for joining us. Alan, again, we appreciate your expertise, and everyone have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.